Hey guys, Thomas Sicily Jr. here, aka Mustached, here to check out Ouija Seance, the final game. I do know that this is a continuation upon the first two Ouija movies, which I have not seen, but after seeing this movie, I think it's okay to avoid those, based on the quality of this third movie. But just as a thing, side note, I do sometimes on my own pronounce it Ouija, because that's the way it looks, and I've actually never understood why the pronunciation was so weird on that word. But whatever. Enough of that nonsense. Let's get on to why this movie isn't that great. So we begin with some credit stuff and some stuff being poured in water. I believe it was like some sort of paint stuff, as we cut to an artist named Sarah, who's doing some art stuff, and then as she gets ready to head out, it shows a bus driving in and does a loud chiming noise to try to indicate that the bus coming in was supposed to indicate an early jump scare right off the gate, even though a bus coming in is not scary and the loud pop was completely unnecessary. This early indication made me realize, oh boy, we are really in for a terrible horror movie. So anyways, she goes to the bar for a bit and then she goes home. And as she's leaving, she gets a call from her house representative person. I don't know what the name of it is, but he says that she needs to bring in some official paperwork to settle her stuff. So anyways, now she has to go to this place. So that's their little invite to the cursed house. At any rate, Barbara, her friend, says that her one of Sarah's previous encounters, Riku, is also going to be showing up to this party, and she doesn't really want anything to do with that. But she does end up traveling with Barbara and this Riku guy and her boyfriend as well. So there's 4 characters that we follow from this point moving forward. And we follow, as we are following them, we learn more about Sarah, whose mom has passed away. And shortly after that, their phone reception dies, indicating a very common trope among horror movies. A tree suddenly falls down, but they easily avoid it. That happening has no effect on anything, but whatever. Anyways, they enter the house where they shortly meet an old man with an axe. It freaks out Barbara and her boyfriend briefly, but then he just leaves. So Barbara eventually wants to explore the rest of the house. So Sarah figures, why not? And we get more stuff with her mom. And when we get this, we get an odd cut to a woman dressed in all white, and we hear screams coming out that aren't really necessary. Nonetheless, Barbara convinces Sarah to stay in this location after learning that the party that they were going to end up going to was cancelled. But in a weird strain of events, her dad, that being Sarah's dad, ends up calling her, even though the bad reception was bad. He gets a moment where the quality of the call is super bad, poorly acted, and then it suddenly drops, and the whole thing with her dad calling is kind of unnecessary to the entire movie. Gotta cut it and save some time, because it doesn't lead to anything. Nonetheless, so yeah. So she decides, you'll keep exploring. So they go to the secret room, and they see behind this bookshelf is a secret door. and she gets more white flashes with the woman, and then a thunderstorm starts. So Barbara's boyfriend tears out the to get to the door and finds the Ouija board. They put on they start the game. They put their hands on the board. The lights go out, and a dark, poorly rendered flash body zooms past them very slowly and non-menacingly. So Sarah goes back upstairs. And then she ends up scaring herself by looking in the mirror, followed by a loud music chime and then another poorly rendered body figure following suit. So Rico heads outside while Barbara gives her boyfriend a nice little blowjob. But he's all like, oh, I can't get it up. And she's all like, well, fuck it, I'm out. So anyways, Sarah gets more visions of a baby and the white figure. It's supposed to insinuate at some point that the white figure was her mom and she was the baby. And Sarah wakes up and falls out of the bed. So she looks briefly at the board and then heads outside. She sees the old man from previously and some blood and axe, and she insinuates that he killed somebody, even though that insinuation is pretty odd to put together. Anyways, she picks up a branch but sees that the man was just making some dinner out of something he hunted. So she mentions her father to him, and he warns her to finish off what she started and then to run from the situation. And then proceeds to give her a pendant with a tree. The pendant doesn't lead to anything as well, so that was completely also unnecessary. So anyways, Rico tries to put the moves on Sarah and they almost kiss at this point, even though their relationship up until that point was arguing with each other nearly most of the runtime up until this point. And Barbara kisses him for some reason. And I finally wrote the other guy's name on my notes. It's Roy. So Roy's this blonde character that's Barbara's boyfriend, by the way. So Roy and Riku have their little spout about stuff. And meanwhile, Sarah drops her amulet that doesn't have anything and doesn't lead to anywhere. And she picks up some childhood drawings because, of course, we have to go to that cliche where the drawings get darker and darker with each passing moment. And another dark, terrible figure appears behind Sarah without her noticing. So after that moment, Riku and Sarah have another little spat where they're yelling at each other, and then Sarah calls Barbara something. I didn't write exactly what she said, but it made Barbara upset, so she runs off. So yeah, Sarah wants to apologize, so she goes out. She's like trying to figure out where she went. We cut to Barbara, who's wandering the woods, suddenly just asking who's out there, even though she was the first to leave, which, again, would make no sense since they were in the middle of the woods and she was the first to leave, so that dialogue was a bit unnecessary. But Sarah and Rico end up trying to look for her. Meanwhile, Roy ends up back with the board and getting possessed, I assume. But Sarah is, suddenly at this point believes that the evil has come from the board. And this is when the movie completely falls apart for me. There was no indication for her to get to this point in suddenly deciding that the board is what caused the evil to occur. It just sort of clicks in her mind, and that sort of thinking within the movie context doesn't work at all. You have to give us as the audience some sort of context as to why she arrived at that point. Um, and there's none. She suddenly believes when all this point in the movie, up until that point, she was like, nope, nope, nope. It's not, it's just stuff is going on. But now it's all like, oh, it's the board. So, anyways, Roy does the look around and asks who's there for a bit, hears a noise, and starts swinging away. And when the lights come on, it ends up being Barbara. How she ended up back at the house is a little bit baffling, but whatever. But Roy suddenly decides to blame Sarah, and the old man comes out of nowhere to knock him out. How he knew of the situation is beyond baffling. So anyways, the old man then says to Sarah that she must defeat the shadows to stop them, whatever that means, and doesn't really ever really indicate how to stop them. Nonetheless, Roy wakes up and Sarah sets up for this little game. Meanwhile, Roy is hanging out with Riku, trying to get out. And he's tricking Riku by only telling the truth and then purposely dropping his cigarette even though it looked like an accident. And then he knocks Riku out. So he goes in for the attack. That being Roy, that is. So we cut to Riku getting in, assuming that he got it stabbed. He comes in all huffy and puffy and all that nonsense. So the old man heads out of the room to, quote, take care of Roy. And we see that Riku looks at the knife with all suspicious suspense while Sarah's bafflingly looking at some other stuff. I think she was like trying to look for something, I forget what, but whatever. She wants to burn the entire place down. Meanwhile, we cut back to the old man who finds Roy, suddenly has died in the tub. A tub that is far outside. And it mentions that it was Riku that killed Roy, and I simply have to ask, how? We are not shown this, and the last thing we saw before the cutaway was the insinuation that it was the opposite way, that it was Roy who did it and Riku, not the other way around. Nonetheless, there's also a weird, bizarre length of time that it would have been required to, move the body outside into the tub, for example, and then come all the way back up. How did, the time between that and whatever Sarah is doing is a little bit hard to believe. But nonetheless, Sarah pushes a jar on his head, and then Roy stabs Sarah in the chest. So she's like fading out, and she manages to get a stab in at Riku. But the old man comes to check in on her, but it's too late. She all fades out. It cuts then to two doctors talking about her condition, and then they leave, and then Sarah wakes up with a poorly rendered shadow appearing next to her. And that was Ouija Seance, the final game. Boy, this movie is terrible. From the acting that is just hokey, to the cliches, to the noises that don't make any sense to the context of what's going on, to just some plot holes of like what Roy was doing and what was Riku doing and how did those two get mixed up in the whole situation that they ended up in at the end there. Yeah. And the whole thing with Sarah just sort of like suddenly coming out of nowhere and saying it's the board kind of is too far-fetched. Again, it just comes out of completely nowhere. I guess I'll give the movie enough credit for at least making the creepy old guy not another, like, cliched, like, oh, I'm just gonna tell you the evil story and then I'm gonna leave. He actually sticks around and actually ends up helping the main character, so there's that, I guess. But other than that little thing, this movie doesn't have a lot going for it. It definitely doesn't make me want to go check out the previous two films by any means necessary. If movies of this caliber have been any example, I don't think I need to go back and see them. I don't think they would be worth my time. As far as this movie is concerned, I thought jumping in would be a good idea, but I was clearly mistaken. This poster is a complete and utter lie. There's nothing of this, what you're seeing on the poster, this lady thing. There's nothing of this caliber in this entire movie. I'm supposed to insinuate that was supposed to be the mother, but the mother never does anything of this nature. So there's that. Other than that, I'm gonna give this movie a 1 out of 10. It's not great. Completely falls apart. The acting, again, not great. The scare factor or, what general stuff, even that just isn't anything. So that is my review of Ouija Seance, the final game. And if you enjoyed this review or / rant, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out that link in the description. I'll head you over to my Patreon page, and any donations are greatly appreciated. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.